When I first started in college, it was back in 2012, and there was definitely concussion protocol that we had to follow, but I don't think we understood the science of what it was doing. And then in the middle of my collegiate career, that's when the CTE research really, took off, and it was, national news. It wasn't just local news anymore. And I think athletes started to pay attention, and I don't know if it's because we're in this area and because it's at our school that it's so prevalent, but there is outlets for us to find the information if the athletes want to know it. I think people that play contact sports might not want to know, what's happening to their head when they hit it.
Obviously, when you think about CTE, the first thing you associate with it is football, and that was kind of like the big groundbreaking thing that kind of caused CTE to come to the forefront of just researching concussion protocol. It has changed a little bit when it comes to soccer. For the most part, people don't necessarily think about soccer when they think about concussions, but it's definitely been something that myself and my teammates have been more conscious about now. I guess in a way it put a little bit of fear in us that if a concussion does happen, we should take it more seriously and make sure we're taking the necessary steps to remedy it. So yeah, it's definitely changed the last couple of years, kind of the whole stigma around concussion protocol and what you should do.
Here at Boston University, the athletes follow a specific protocol whenever there is suspicion of a concussion.
So once you go head-to-head and you do make contact, you come off the field instantly, and then they do a concussion test on the spot with your trainer who's certified in concussion testing. And then if you do have symptoms, you're out. And I believe it's if you're symptom-free for a week, you can come back to running or working out, but still not contact. So they take it very seriously, and I think that's great because a lot of times, the athlete themselves doesn't want to admit that they hit their head or doesn't want to sit out of a game, but they don't realize that the worst kind of concussion is if you get one and then have contact immediately after.
But before they knew the seriousness of concussion safety, both Shekali and Blauner were some of those athletes who didn't want to stop and kept playing through their head injuries.
It happened during a practice. To be honest, I was a freshman, and I was just so keen on getting into the squad and proving myself that when it initially happened, I didn't say anything about it and I kept playing. But later that night, I had a pounding head, I couldn't sleep, it was miserable, and I was freaking out because it had never happened to me before. So the next morning, first thing I did was go to the trainers and talk to them about it, and then they told me that I probably had a minor concussion after we went to the protocol because I was pretty symptomatic. So it was definitely kind of scary, even it being a minor concussion, because I didn't really know what was happening, so I'd never felt that way before. So it kind of opened my eyes a little bit and kind of made me more aware of what I should look out for when getting into hits and stuff like that.
I don't know if all athletes would feel this way, but I was definitely one that, thought I was fine the next day. I was arguing with my coaches about it. I was arguing with my parents, let me back in. I'm fine. I don't have a headache. I'm good. Because soccer was everything. And I know a lot of athletes feel like that. You're letting your team down if you don't go back in. You're letting your fans down if you don't go back in. But realistically, they just want you to be safe, and your parents want you to be safe, and your coaches. So I was stubborn, and I thought I was fine, but I'm very, very happy my coaches and my parents kept me out.
So every single day, I would go in, and they would test my symptoms to see how I was feeling. And then once I was completely asymptomatic, there was still kind of a refractory period, so they were very, very careful about it to make sure that I was 100% okay before even letting me get back into practice.
But also our training staff here at BU obviously follows what our school has been researching. So basically what you do is if you hit your head or anything happens that could have caused a concussion, you come off the field. The next step is getting evaluated by one of our certified trainers, and then depending on your symptoms, they decide, when's a proper time to come back. Our coaches just try to teach proper technique. I think that can save a lot of people from getting concussion, is just knowing the right way to go up for a header. In hockey, the right way to hit. Just using the proper techniques.
It's kind of one of those things that because the coaches and trainers are so aware of everything that goes around on the field and in practice, that they'll basically step in the second they have an inclination that it happened. But if we were in the locker room or halftime of a game or something like that, and you could tell somebody was out of it or just disoriented for whatever reason, or was hey, my head really hurts, it's one of those things where we'd be hey, go talk to the trainers, it's not worth it, essentially.
Unfortunately, similar to the correlation between CTE and certain positions in football, where you play on the soccer field also relates to how many headers a player will take and a higher risk of possible concussions.
The positions I played in college were ones that had a lot of header balls that were coming my way, and I think that because I was more aware of what CTE was and what head injuries were causing, I definitely was more safe going up for them. I wouldn't go for something that was dangerous because, you know, when you've had a couple and you realize that it could be affecting your life later on past your sport, I definitely think you're more aware.
You have some guys on the team that are like challenged for every single head ball, and you kind of have to wonder if that's kind of taking a toll on them or kind of just how they feel. At some point you kind of have to wonder to what extent it's almost like too much, just constantly heading the ball.
But what will get soccer players to stop going up for headers, or will stop football players from making helmet-to-helmet hits and get these athletes to realize concussions and CTE are serious?
I think changing athletes' views of what a concussion is and what it can cause will make it a more acceptable reason to be sitting out. People think that, you know, since there's no physical injury, since they're not on crutches, since you're not, you know, in a cast, that, you know, you're being a baby or you're not really hurt, but it's the most dangerous injury to have. So I think changing that stigma about concussions is huge, and it's what's going to change sports.
I think a good thing to do would maybe be expand that research a little bit to athletes inside other sports. In general, like soccer, that are more contact, even lacrosse, people hit each other all the time. So I think some more research should be done, kind of checking those sports to see whether or not it is as prevalent as it is in football, but I definitely think some of it will show up, which will kind of open the athletic community to the fact that it is not just a unisport thing, it's across all athletics.
The question of whether athletes would go back and not play their sport is one of the most difficult to answer, because your sport isn't just something you do as a hobby, it's your entire life. Your teammates are your family, it's your pastime, it's what you love doing, it's what gets stress out. It's so much more than just a sport that I can't say that I wouldn't have played. I loved it too much, and it gave me so much in my life that I probably would have played. And I know that that's not the answer people want to hear. That's not you know, what people want football players to be saying, that, you know, they would have done it anyway. But I think a lot of athletes might feel that way. And if the technique of a sport can change, or the rules of a sport can change, people won't have to look back and say, oh, I wish I didn't play this sport. They can say, I played the sport in a safer way.